Rolling.
Okay, good morning, everyone. Welcome and thanks for coming. And thank you, Poquin, for volunteering. This is awesome. I really am excited to see your lesson today. I know we've done this work in the past, and Sherwin, thanks for participating in this. So let's try to be as tight as possible. I know sometimes we run over in this work, but we'll try to be focused in this initial pre-conference. And really what we're going to do is we're going to look at the Ganas form, and we're going to sort of talk through. So if you want to just get started, Poquin, around sort of talking us through the big ideas in this lesson in the Ganas format, so the launch, explore, summarize piece.
Okay, so what I did was I actually took one piece from session 2.2, and that's the first part. So I'll actually start with the learning goal. We usually just write that on the board. So their learning goal for today would be compare two fractions with different numerators and denominators and explain their reasoning. And then we'll quickly go over vocabulary. And I'm still trying to figure out how to do this. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm just going to draw it out on the board to go over like the whole, the numerator, the denominator, and the equivalent. And the ones that I'm really trying to focus on are the numerator and denominator. We're getting them to really understand those two. And then I'm going to give them that problem. So a fourth grader was making fraction cards for 3/4 and 5/6 and said that they both had one piece missing, so they are the same size. And so what I'm going to try to get them to do is make an argument for how they either agree or disagree. And so so what they should be able to do is they should be able to see that the 3/4 is less than the 5/6. I think they will be able to see that already. But the part that I really want to emphasize in this lesson for them is getting them to talk more about it, to be able to explain why the 3/4 is less than the 5/6. And so what we're trying to get them to see is, we've been talking yesterday, this is about probably our third lesson on fractions, so they're not real heavy into it. So yesterday we started talking a little bit about numerator and denominator. So one of the things we're trying to get them to do is to be able to compare these using the numerator and the denominator. So for example, say this one says, well, the denominator is 4, so there's 4 parts, but this one's 6. And so when you cut fractions into more pieces, you'll get smaller parts. Mm-hmm. So that means, kind of thinking about this as a whole too, you're getting closer to 1. So this is a bigger piece because your numerator is covering more pieces. So that's one part that we're going to focus on, and I'm just going to give them a few minutes to sort of think through that, and then they'll talk in partners trying to come up with arguments. And then we'll go into starting them with a game. So yesterday they were making the fraction cards. So today we'll introduce the game where they start playing the game, and it's sort of just like war. So if you and I are playing, we'll flip over our cards, and you'll have a fraction, I'll have a fraction, and then we have to decide which of them is bigger. Which of the fractions is bigger. And so then the part that I'm trying to emphasize is like, okay, so I would say, well, my fraction, whatever, 5/6 is bigger than 3/5 or whatever it is, and then try to give them the words to explain that. So whether they use like numerator, denominator, or if they're equivalent. So that's another one that throughout the lesson we're trying to get them to focus on which ones are equivalent, even though they might look different.
So when they're playing their game, when they
have that debate going, or they're trying to figure out what if they don't know when they come to like a specific fraction and they can't determine if my fraction's bigger than yours or vice versa.
So I think
Can we go around and kind of help them, and not help them but guide them?
I think so. I think as long as we sort of agree on maybe what do we want to ask? Yeah, like
Well,
what is
but that's a great question, though. Let's just say that we're not doing this lesson, or we're not observing. How would you approach that? I mean, because we all, keeping in mind that we don't want them to get stuck, right? So how, or these problems, do they have tools or places to go when they're stuck? That's a great question, yeah.
So there's not an answer on the back, and I'm thinking possibly what they could do is maybe move them to the side. Like if there's one that they're really stuck on, they can just move them to the side, and then we can talk about it later. Or as I'm going around, then they can say, okay, we don't know what to do with this one.
Okay, yeah.
And
no,
because
that
I'm
makes sense.
thinking even like
And that would be a good formative assessment, right, for you, because if they put them to the side, then you can make a note.
See how many kids have
Right.
stacks.
Boom, because you're going to have the same problem, and then you can revisit those in the summary, perhaps. I don't know.
Yeah, and so I'm thinking, because I'm anticipating, right, that I'm going to have some that are even doing it wrong,
Yeah.
right? So that's the other thing is, the fraction might look different, and they might not realize it's equivalent, and then they're saying, oh, this is not equivalent, and they are, so I'm anticipating I'm not going to get all of them, right? Like I'm not going to catch all of their mistakes, but one, they can move them aside if they agree they're struggling. The other one could be just as I'm going around, if I catch somebody making those mistakes. And so that's my look for also is when, because you guys are going to be the extra eyes, so looking for exactly what misconceptions are they having and who's having those misconceptions. Because I have about half of them, I think, that are still struggling a little bit with fractions. Some of them are understanding it, but a lot of them are not. And so just trying to figure out exactly what those misconceptions are. So if you could be as specific as possible when you're watching them.
So, yeah, and that brings up this idea, too. I was just thinking, is it too cumbersome for them to write down, write down the two fractions and then put a greater than sign? You don't want that. Because the other way to do this would be to document that. The book doesn't ask you to do that, though, right? Okay. Because we also don't want to break the flow of the game, too, right? There's some.
So you basically wanted them to, through each round, label whichever fraction was bigger and say round one.
Yeah, I mean, if they did this, if they documented it, it is a way for you then, because then they can put their greater than or less than sign. This would be your formative assessment tool at the end of the class, or even during the class, it would allow you to go around and quickly do a scan. But I don't know if that's the best approach, because we don't want to break the flow of the game either. So
I like the idea because you could have like that would be like your score sheet, because you could have it could be Zach on one side, Sherwin on one side, and you can see who won the first round, the second round, third round. But I don't know that. I don't know how well.
Plus, you know what though, because then I can go back and I can look at, well, what did I miss? Did they mark one that was incorrect?
Right.
Because otherwise
Could be a
I
flag.
don't know
Yeah.
unless I'm watching them.
right.
And I think
So possibly what I could do though is to make it easier and faster and less confusing is because in the end I'm gonna want them to answer this question, right? So I think one of the ways that I can model that for them is, so that initial one piece is missing.
Okay.
So right here, do they agree? She's saying because there's only one piece missing, that they're the same.
I see. Okay.
And so they have to decide, is she right?
Justify the
Are they
thinking.
the same? So what I could do is I could just say greater than, right? We can just use the greater than symbol so that everybody would have this fraction is greater than. So then they could say 5/6 is greater than 1/4, and then they'll just know to always put the bigger fraction first.
Oh, yeah, good point.
And then that way it won't take too much time, I don't think,
Right.
to just write it
Right.
down.
Do the kids like to score? Like say who won?
They could also put their initial there.
Or they could put it like this. You could put, they could have on their, in their math notebook or whatever, they could have a space down the middle. And this would be Poquin, and this would be Zach. And then they'd put the fraction that they got and the fraction he got, and then they'd have to either put less than or greater than. So there'd be, or equal to. So for each one, Poquin would put her fraction, Zach would put his, and then they'd have to decide what
Yeah,
goes there.
so
Yeah.
that's another thing that you would kind of assess whether they understand those symbols. Because they're not gonna all go in one direction. They're not gonna be able to put the fractions on each side, because you have to put yours on your column and you would have to
Right.
put yours on your
Well,
column.
in getting back to her point, though, we don't want that to be the learning goal.
That's
So I think, I love that idea. I'm thinking we scaffold it
Later on, maybe?
later on. That's sort of a scaffolding piece.
Yeah.
Because even just looking at, using those symbols in art class, or when Miss Toya was in there, we spent a lot of time,
Yeah.
kind of reminding them about using the alligator or the Pac-Man. Pac-Man and alligator always want more. So it's just a matter of, because that takes a lot of time to reinforce that with these students. I know they've had prior experience with those symbols, but it does take quite a bit of time to refreshen that and practice. So, I think that's awesome, but we don't want that, like you guys said, to be the learning goal, because it's going to take away from what you already had planned.
Yeah, because then I can see myself taking time to explain which one is less than, which one is greater than. Yeah.
Yeah. So be thinking about how we might do that, but I just some ideas there. So just sort of in the interest of time and brevity, go ahead and sort of talk us through the remainder piece. And I do appreciate you asking us to look for those pieces. Can I just add one piece before she continues, though? In the fact that we're going to be videoing the lesson, I think walking around and observing and making observations based on evidence so we can report those in the final is important. I'm hesitant to interact with students in this particular day because we're going to be shooting video. Would that be an unreasonable request to? Are we okay?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. I'm just thinking that we don't want to have a lot of discussion going on with those.
Okay. So then they're going to write down. Let me see, sorry. So here they could write down, so instead of using, because they have their textbook and there's a page in there where it asks them to write their equivalent fractions, but if I just give them a sheet like this, then they can write there, this is bigger than or greater than this, and then they can just include their equivalent fractions in there, right? So I think we'll do this. Then I'm just gonna let them do that for a while, go around, check with them, make sure I'm listening for, are they using that vocabulary? Are their sentences following sort of a format? This fraction is bigger than this fraction because, and that explanation. And then what I want to do at the end is go back to this original question for this one piece is missing. So they'll have had a chance to look at it, then like we tried to figure it out together, talk it through, and then after we've played the game together, then hopefully we should have a little bit better vocabulary now for how to explain. So we'll go back over this and then probably as a whole class talk this out, sort of like, what do we think we would say this time, and then give them about maybe 5 to 10 minutes to write in their notebooks their answer. So they would talk it out whole group or partners, but then their explanation is on their own and it's writing. And that's the only part where I don't have a lot of modeling for writing. It's a lot of just me talking and them talking throughout the lesson. And then they would write out their answer. So I don't know,
To the-
should I, yeah.
Okay. So one of my questions along those lines, because I think you are doing the lesson is really designed to scaffold the thinking process through the discourse process. In the beginning, in the launch, are you going to model a discussion? In other words, me and I are playing, for example, and we do our fractions and then sort of model the thinking process, the expectation of what you want that conversation or that discourse to look like visually.
So when I show them, not necessarily in the launch.
Okay.
Although I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to, for this first part, I'm going to model how we might start talking about it. So either write it, I think I'll write it on the board, sort of the sentence frames that I want them to use. So the fraction, and then they fill in the blank. The fraction 5/6 is bigger or smaller than this one. And then sort of their reasoning because,
Yeah.
and then, or these fractions are the same size because, and then they'd have to sort of fill in the blank. So I think I'm going to put those up on the board sort of as to start them. And then that'll sort of be what I want them to do at the end when they're writing it. They could still use those same sentence frames. So if we go with the greater than, and they've been doing that throughout the lesson, then they should be able at the end to come to that, like, this fraction is greater than this fraction because.
Okay.
Do they have any other tools like fraction kits or anything? Because when they have just their cards and they're trying to debate, no, my fraction's bigger, and you're saying, no, yours is there any other tools that they have that they could resort to try to figure it out?
They have fraction strips, but the strips only have like
Certain
fourths,
fractions.
eighths, and sixteenths. And in their cards that they just made, they have like tenths. They have mixed numbers.
How do you feel about throwing mixed numbers in there for them as part of this?
So
Activity.
we started talking yesterday about how, like, the numerator, when the numerator is bigger than the denominator, and some of them are able to start coming up with those arguments saying when the numerator is bigger than the denominator, they know it's greater than 1 because 1 is, and some of them will say when the denominator and the numerator are the same, then they know that it's equal to 1. So if there are more parts in the numerator, then they know they're greater than 1. Not all of them can do that.
So they have improper fractions too and mixed numbers.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, and along Leah's point too, and I was thinking, are they going to go? Will some of them naturally go to a model? In other words, and draw bars. You know, this bar method where they draw 3/4 versus 5/6 to determine as sort of a mechanism to determine that. Is this a natural scaffold for them to allow them to make that decision, or is this not natural for them to automatically go to the model?
I don't know if they would I think they would, but I'm not sure. So I think what I could do is give them the option to use their paper and their notebooks to kind of check to draw it out.
Yeah.
And we talked yesterday about making the models because the model makes it easier to explain. So yesterday we were trying to explain
Yeah.
how is this more than 1?
Right.
And it was 3/2. So we were trying to explain how is that more than 1? And so they were struggling. And once we drew the pictures, then they were able to see, oh yeah, so if you draw 3, right, 3 holes, and then you cut them all in half, oh, we have 3/2. And so then they were able to explain. So we were talking about making those models makes it easier to explain. So hopefully they will go back to it, but I don't know.
Okay, well, that's going to be exciting. Good. Well, so thinking of time, are there some closing comments here, and then we'll wrap it up with some quick questions. And is there something we missed? I just want to summarize the pieces to look for, thinking about misconceptions around the explanation of a fraction, whether it's larger, right? I mean, that's really, as we begin to concentrate on and focus on the discourse between the two students, if they, going back to this, if they use the justification, oh, well, this is one piece not shaded and this is one piece not shaded, therefore they're the same, that's a misconception, right? Sort of look for those things.
Yeah, and this one's really good about giving you those areas where they might have the misconceptions. So on page 81, it says, do they use representation? So are they drawing? Are they using representations? Are they using reasoning based on fraction equivalencies that they know? So they do know, like 4/8. Some of them do know 4/8 is equal to half, 3/6 is equal to half. So are they using those to help them explain?
Those benchmarks.
And then do they compare the fractions to landmark fractions such as half or one?
Yes.
Are they paying attention to the value and meaning of both the numerator and denominator? So one of them, and I don't know if it was on this one or the next one, but some of them are like, another area to look for is like just saying, oh, well, 6 is bigger than 4, so it has, just kind of like not really understanding what numerator and denominator are, but looking at which one's a bigger number. Are they having that misconception?
And then like here, one of the examples of one of the kids, I can see from the picture that 2/3 and 4/6 are equal, exactly equal. So 5/6 is 1/6 bigger than 2/3.
Which page is it?
I think I have the page numbers.
80.
80?
That one's 80.
80. Okay. Oh, right.
So they're taking what they know and then adding to
Adding
that.
piece. And again, you're right, that comes down to modeling too, and so, yeah, I know you're going to do that in the beginning a little bit, so that will be great.
You
To-
could call that a model.
Yeah.
Make that reinforced.
Yeah. Okay, so closing comments for the pre-conference. I think we have a relatively good understanding of what the lesson's going to be, what the expectations of the kids should be, what they're going to be doing, and then some things that we're tasked with to look for misconceptions. Anything, does that sort of sum it up? Any last minute questions, any guidance before we break and move the cameras?
I don't have anything to say.
Good to go.